we'll try to keep this to a tuna fish size can
Mhm.
because it's blood pressure, and I know that's too big, but two specific aspects, or if I can ask you.
Yeah. So yeah, you were actually on my list of like reaching out to and talking to you about it. Like I went through and did a little evaluation on you, and do you mind telling me like what is your blood pressure at these days?
Well, it varies. I just took it before class, and so the two things I wanted to raise are, one, just the anticipatory effect, which I think is big, and the other one is it goes up during my spiritual practice,
That's actually quite normal. Like
but hard to explain to the physician.
yes, I get you. But like you know, when I was with Master Choa, at a certain level of meditation, we were required to travel with blood pressure cuff because you know certain meditations were very peaceful, but it drives the blood pressure up really high. You know, not for a super long time, but for a time. You know, and so at a certain level you have to start monitoring your blood pressure all the time, and so
Yes.
yeah, it's a little bit of a thing, and so
The
deeper
stomach's
spiritual
running.
practices can be a little bit hard on the body. You know, you would think they would be very peaceful to the body, but
Yeah,
you
that
know,
was the look I got. Meditation makes your blood pressure go up.
right.
Oh,
Yeah. Simple meditation will make it go down, but the really deep meditation actually usually elevates the blood pressure.
yeah.
And so you know it usually is very intense meditation or very deep. It's
Well, I mean,
very strong meditations do it. And so given your practice and what I know of your practice, it's not surprising. And so the thing that I would do is you know, there's different approaches and there's different reasons why the blood pressure can go up. And you know, we can play with oils and things, but a lot of times with something like this, I tend to go a little bit more to some herbs rather than just the essential oils. I mean, one of the very first things you always do for blood pressure is you treat fluid volume. You know, you use diuretics to reduce any sort of fluid retention, and the fluid retention, once it's reduced, actually will lower the blood pressure because the heart doesn't have to work so hard to pump. But I find that I use a combination of a couple of things. I use Goda Cola capsules. And for somebody your size, I would say probably 3 capsules twice a day would be pretty good. And this is very much of a venous tonic, like a vein tonic. And it really helps improve the function of the veins, the elasticity of the veins, helps move blood from the lower limbs up back towards the heart. And a lot of times this will actually help reduce the blood pressure just by itself. If you look this herb up, a lot of times they don't even mention it for blood pressure, but I find that it is one of the things that I would start with. And especially, you know, how you have the first number and the second number, you know, you look for a ratio, like it's 120/80. You know, you're looking for a certain ratio for that differentiation between the two. And when that second number starts climbing and the difference in numbers isn't like in that ratio, for me, Gotu Kola will usually correct that, usually within a day or two of treatment. I mean, it starts normalizing the blood pressure, and the first number can still be a little bit high, but that becomes easier to get down. And so I usually start with having people do Gotu Kola. And then there's an Ayurvedic herb, Arjuna, and a couple of capsules a day, twice a day probably. And from there, then I either have them use a little bit of hawthorn or I have them use a little bit of coenzyme Q10. I would probably suggest the coenzyme Q10 for you. Um, you could do it instead of coenzyme Q10, do ubiquinol, which is a more digestible form of coenzyme Q10. That combination, I mean, sometimes you still need to augment it a little bit, but that is a pretty good treatment for, especially in the early stages of treatment for the blood pressure. And then you can go through and start augmenting based on how much that normalizes it. Like you could do a whole bunch more, but I kind of like to see like what that does and where it leaves the blood pressure. And then from there you can adjust. And so,
Can all those herbs be taken at the same time?
yeah.
Okay. And how much on the CoQ10?
For you, I would probably say maybe a couple capsules a day. I mean, I've had people take up to 12 capsules a day, like 6 at a time, and more severe, heart related issues. The body does generate some coenzyme Q10, but as we get older, it generates less and less. And it is tied to some circulatory function and energy levels. And just when the coenzyme Q10 diminishes in the body, the blood pressure usually gets erratic. And so I just like to supplement and augment. And it doesn't mean that you are going to have to take it every day, but you take it kind of consistently and the blood pressure does stabilize most times. Like there has been cases where it didn't. But, there's usually more going on. Always supporting the kidneys is always very good with any sort of blood pressure issue. And, again, going back to Master Choa, when people were doing meditation on a regular basis, he always would say, from time to time, clean the kidneys, treat the kidneys, sweep the kidneys, do energy work on the kidneys. It doesn't have to be all the time, but like once a month, like do a little maintenance on the kidneys. And, I always kind of took that to heart. And when I go to see the doctor, I was like, bring me the menu. I want to have things like checked out. And, I have them check the kidneys. And the last time I was there, I had a new doc. And he was looking at my blood panel and everything. And he goes, man, your kidneys are really good for your age. He goes, you have a young man's kidneys. And I was like, yeah, thank you. And he goes, no, really, your kidneys are really good. Like he kept saying it over and over again. And I was like, oh, okay. He goes, no, you have no idea. Like your kidneys are really good. And, it's just been through the years, like using the things we talked about, using parsley, using lovage. I mean, probably more than anything, I've used parsley more than anything. Lovage, we went through a period of time where it was really hard to get. And so I would use it, but just like time to time, I wasn't using it all the time. But like I've been using parsley for years and years and years. And things like cedar, rubbed on the body, Venus tonic as well. Can help it's not directly for the kidneys, but you're supporting some of the other functions in the body that would then like play into the kidneys. And then always kind of supporting lymphatic work, because the thing is like the lymphatic work is dealing with a lot of the excess fluid that's left over from the circulation and the cardiovascular system. And so, the kidneys are part of getting rid of some of that excess fluid. And so to treat the kidneys and the lymphatic system together is, I think, just part of overall health. It slows down the aging process, but it's not like the direct treatment for blood pressure, but it definitely contributes. And I would just keep all of those in play. And, the thing that I always tell the people that I'm treating with something like that is, think big picture, don't get too fixated on the symptom unless the blood pressure is really going up. Think about like just what's it going to look like if I do this over 30 days or over 60 days? Not that like you had a bad day or two, because those happen. It could be stress, could be poor sleep. Here we talk about energetic things. Cords can drive blood pressure up quite substantially. And,
Right.
I've had some cords send my blood pressure like way high. I cut the cords and then it drops back down to normal. And so, and I wasn't even aware that the person was mad at me. You know what I mean? I was just,
Yeah, you too.
yeah, oh yeah. People. Yeah.
Will all of this help bring down the heart rate as well?
Heart rate, that I would probably go to oils. So you have some choices. So usually the first choice that I do with that is you'll have to play around what like kind of works for you. A lot of times I go to Lang Lang first, and I actually have people take that internally, like two or three drops, like in a little water, and very good for helping to begin to lowering the pulse. There's been times where we needed to do it with neroli instead. And if you want to experiment with that, we can do a little tiny bottle for you so you can, because it's a little bit expensive. Lang Lang's much cheaper. And I mean, it's not crazy priced, but it's more expensive. And so, instead of buying a big bottle, just do like a little tiny bottle, do a couple of drops, see if it lowers the pulse. And then if it works, then you can get a bigger bottle. But if it doesn't, then you're not invested in the big bottle. And so
start with the Lang Lang or start with.
I would start with the Lang Lang first.
Okay.
I mean, that's practical. You could always increase dosage with Lang Lang. It's kind of fortifying to the body. A lot of times it does knock it out.
I've been inhaling it and it helps a little. I wasn't sure about taking it in.
Inhaling would help, like on the wrist would help, but usually to really kind of lower it, you almost have to do it internal.
Okay.
Yeah. I have had vetiver in a few cases lower the heart rate as well. And then in the Vital Center kit, the uvula blend, I've had that lower people's blood pressure somewhat. Not enough to where I would say like, hey, this is a thing, or not blood pressure, the pulse. Not enough to where I'd say, hey, this is the go-to thing for lowering pulse, but enough to where it's always in the periphery of like, if these other things don't work, maybe that would work.
Inhalation?
That you could probably get away with just inhalation. You might need to put a couple drops on your wrist, but for that, the big one is inhaling it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And just a last comment so I can let someone else talk.